Before the lights come on, before the first guitar chord echoes through the stadium, before nearly 100,000 people scream every lyric in perfect unison, there is a moment of silence, a moment where the impossible is about to happen. A single performer is preparing to walk onto a stage that has become the center of the entertainment world. Not a championship game, not the Super Bowl, not the Olympics, a concert. Except calling it a concert doesn't quite explain what the world was witnessing. It had become an economic event, a cultural event, a global business phenomenon. Cities competed for tour dates. Hotels sold out months in advance. Restaurants hired extra staff. Airlines added flights. Local governments estimated hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into their economies because one woman was coming to town. The tour would ultimately generate more than $2 billion in ticket sales, making it the highest-grossing concert tour in history and redefining what was possible for a live entertainment business. Yet none of that explains the most remarkable part of the story, because Taylor Swift didn't build an empire by inventing a revolutionary piece of technology. She didn't discover oil, she didn't found a bank, she didn't create the next social media platform. She wrote songs. Songs she first scribbled into notebooks as a little girl, words that would eventually become one of the most valuable collections of intellectual property ever created by a single artist. But just as her career reached heights few entertainers had ever experienced, she discovered something that changed everything. She didn't fully own the work that had made her famous. For most artists, that would have been the end of the story. For Taylor Swift, it became the beginning of an entirely different one. Because what happened next wasn't simply a fight over music. It became one of the greatest business strategies the entertainment industry has ever seen. She didn't just rewrite her songs, she rewrote the rules. This is the story of how a teenage songwriter became one of the most powerful businesswomen in modern history, and how ownership became her greatest hit. Every empire has an origin. Every extraordinary achievement begins with a decision, and every success leaves behind a blueprint. Welcome to the Art of Success, legendary success stories from around the world, presented by the Wealth and Business Network. Today, the story behind the business empire of Taylor Swift. Long before sold-out stadiums, long before Grammy Awards, long before the headlines, the billion-dollar tour, or the global phenomenon that would eventually become Taylor Swift, there was a little girl sitting quietly with a notebook. She wasn't writing because someone had assigned homework. She wasn't writing because she thought anyone would ever read her words. She wrote because she couldn't imagine not writing. Growing up in the small town of Wyoming, Pennsylvania, Taylor Allison Swift spent much of her childhood surrounded by ordinary American life. Tree-lined neighborhoods, school hallways, family gatherings, long drives through rural Pennsylvania. On the surface, there was little to suggest that one of the most influential entertainers in modern history was growing up there. Her father, Scott Swift, worked as a stockbroker, spending his days analyzing markets, managing investments, and understanding how value is created over time. Her mother, Andrea Swift, had worked in marketing before dedicating much of her time to raising the family. Neither parent came from the music business. There were no recording studios in the basement, no famous producers dropping by the house, no shortcuts waiting to be inherited. But while they couldn't hand their daughter a music career, they could give her something far more valuable: the confidence to believe that extraordinary goals were worth pursuing. Like many children, Taylor loved stories. Unlike most children, she couldn't stop creating them. Before songwriting became her identity, writing itself had already become her habit. She filled notebooks with poems, short stories, observations, fragments of conversations, ideas inspired by school, ideas inspired by family, ideas inspired by everyday life. Even then, she was unknowingly developing the skill that would later define her career. Observation. Great songwriters don't simply hear melodies, they notice what everyone else overlooks. A look across a classroom, a difficult conversation, a first heartbreak, a quiet victory, an awkward silence. They collect moments that most people forget. Then they turn those moments into something unforgettable. That ability would become Taylor Swift's greatest competitive advantage. Not her voice, not her image, her perspective. When she was around 9 years old, another fascination began to take hold. Country music. Artists like the Dixie Chicks, Shania Twain, Faith Hill, and Leanne Rimes weren't simply performing songs. They were telling stories. Stories about families, friendships, dreams, heartbreak, hope. The music felt personal, and for a young writer that mattered. Taylor didn't just want to sing those songs, she wanted to create stories of her own. Then one Christmas, everything changed. Instead of another toy, she received a guitar. To most families, it might have looked like an ordinary gift. For Taylor, it became the beginning of an obsession. Hours turned into days. Days turned into months. She practiced until her fingers hurt, then practiced some more. She learned chords, studied melodies, experimented with lyrics. Most importantly, she kept writing. While many aspiring performers focused on covering someone else's music, Taylor became increasingly interested in creating original songs. It was a subtle difference, but it would eventually change everything. Performers build audiences, songwriters build assets. Every original song represented something she owned: an idea, a melody, a lyric, a story that had never existed before. She couldn't have known it then, but she wasn't just building a repertoire. She was beginning to build intellectual property, one song at a time. This distinction is easy to overlook. Entertainment history is filled with extraordinary performers. Far fewer become extraordinary owners. From the very beginning, Taylor's instinct wasn't merely to perform, it was to create. That difference would later become one of the defining reasons she built lasting wealth. A performance ends when the audience goes home. Ownership continues creating value long after the applause fades. Without realizing it, the notebooks scattered around her childhood bedroom weren't simply filled with dreams. They were the first pages of a future business. By the time most teenagers were still wondering what they wanted to become, Taylor had already made up her mind. She wasn't hoping someone would discover her. She was preparing for the day they did. There was just one problem. Pennsylvania wasn't where country music careers were built. If she wanted to chase this dream, she would have to go where the industry lived, nearly 700 miles away, a city called Nashville. And before she could convince a record label, she would first have to convince her family. That decision would change every chapter that followed. Sometimes the biggest risk in life isn't leaving home. It's believing that home is no longer where your future is waiting. For the Swift family, Nashville wasn't just another city, it was a leap into uncertainty. For Taylor, it was the only place where her dream had a chance to become reality. Every great success story eventually reaches a moment where believing is no longer enough. A decision has to be made. For Taylor Swift, that decision didn't belong to her alone. It belonged to her family. By the early 2000s, Taylor had become increasingly certain about what she wanted. Not someday, not after college, not after another hobby, now. Country music wasn't simply something she enjoyed. It had become the direction of her life. There was just one problem. The music industry wasn't in Pennsylvania. It lived nearly 700 miles away, in Nashville, Tennessee. For thousands of aspiring artists every year, Nashville represented possibility. It was where careers were launched, dreams were tested, and countless talented musicians discovered that talent alone wasn't enough. Every street seemed to hold another songwriter carrying a guitar case. Every coffee shop had someone hoping to be discovered. Every record label heard more dreams than they could ever sign. The competition wasn't just intense, it was relentless. Most families would have considered the odds. Scott and Andrea Swift considered their daughter. By now, they had watched years of relentless discipline. This wasn't a passing interest. Taylor wasn't asking to skip practice. She was asking for more practice. She wasn't waiting for motivation. She had already built habits. Every day she wrote. Every day she learned. Every day she became a little better than she had been the day before. There was something different about that kind of consistency. Talent often appears suddenly. Discipline reveals itself slowly, and discipline is usually the better investment. Eventually, the family made a decision that would alter every chapter of their lives. Scott Swift transferred his career. The family relocated to Hendersonville, Tennessee, just outside Nashville. From the outside, it looked like parents supporting a talented daughter. From a business perspective, it was an extraordinary investment. They weren't purchasing guaranteed success. They were purchasing access. Access to record labels, access to publishers, access to professional songwriters, access to opportunity. In business, location often determines opportunity. Silicon Valley became the birthplace of technology companies because entrepreneurs surrounded themselves with investors, engineers, and ambitious builders. Hollywood became the center of filmmaking because talent, capital, and production gathered in one place. Wall Street became synonymous with finance because opportunity concentrated there. Nashville worked the same way. Success wasn't guaranteed, but proximity dramatically improved the odds. The Swift family wasn't chasing certainty. They were increasing probability. That distinction matters. Successful people rarely control outcomes. They consistently place themselves where opportunities are more likely to occur. For Taylor, Nashville became a classroom. Every meeting became a lesson. Every rejection became research. Every conversation revealed how the industry actually worked. She visited Music Row, knocked on doors, introduced herself to publishers, handed out demo recordings. Many meetings lasted only minutes. Some executives admired her determination. Others believed she was simply too young. Many smiled politely before saying no. Rejection has a strange way of revealing commitment. People who only love success usually disappear after rejection. People who love the work keep showing up anyway. Taylor kept showing up again and again and again. At an age when most teenagers were worrying about school dances, she was studying publishing agreements, learning how songwriting credits worked, watching experienced writers construct songs, listening more than speaking, absorbing everything. It wasn't glamorous, it was education. Eventually, one meeting changed everything. Music publisher Dan Dimtrow recognized something unusual. Not just talent, potential, more importantly, original material. Taylor wasn't arriving with someone else's songs. She was bringing stories no one else could write. That distinction mattered. Record labels can find singers. Finding authentic songwriters is considerably harder. Soon afterward, Taylor signed a songwriting agreement with Sony/ATV Music Publishing, becoming one of the youngest songwriters ever signed by the company. It wasn't a recording contract. The world still didn't know her name, but inside the music business, people had begun paying attention. She hadn't become famous, she had become valuable. There is a difference. Fame attracts attention. Value attracts opportunity. One disappears quickly, the other compounds over time. Still, one challenge remained. Publishing songs and becoming a global artist were two very different things. Taylor had entered the industry. Now she needed someone willing to bet on her future. That someone would soon arrive. His name was Scott Borchetta, and together, they were about to build something neither could accomplish alone. This chapter reveals one of the most overlooked principles behind extraordinary success. Opportunity is rarely distributed equally. It is concentrated. The Swift family's move wasn't simply about geography. It was about placing Taylor inside an ecosystem where relationships, knowledge, mentorship, and opportunities existed every day. Many entrepreneurs believe success comes from working harder. Hard work matters, but working in the right environment often multiplies the return on that effort. The family wasn't buying success. They were buying access, and access changed everything. Taylor Swift had earned something more valuable than a record deal. She had earned credibility. Inside Nashville, people were beginning to believe she wasn't another teenager chasing a dream. She was becoming a songwriter worth investing in. But the biggest opportunity of her young career wasn't waiting inside an established record label. It was waiting inside one that didn't even exist yet. By 2005, Taylor Swift had accomplished something remarkable. She had become one of the youngest professional songwriters in Nashville. Industry executives knew her name. Publishers respected her work. Doors that had once remained closed were finally beginning to open. But another decision was approaching. And like many of the decisions that would define her career, the obvious choice wasn't necessarily the right one. Most aspiring artists dream of signing with one of Nashville's established record labels. Companies with decades of history, large marketing budgets, experienced executives, national radio connections, a proven path to success. On paper, that seemed like the safest route. But success isn't always built by following the safest path. Sometimes it's built by finding people who believe in the same future you do. One of those people was Scott Borchetta. At the time, Borchetta wasn't running one of Nashville's biggest record labels. He wasn't running any record label at all. After years working at DreamWorks Records and Universal, he had decided to do something many people considered risky. He was leaving the security of an established company to launch an entirely new record label from scratch. It would be called Big Machine Records. Imagine the conversation. A teenage songwriter and an executive starting a company that didn't yet have a track record. Neither represented certainty. Both represented possibility. Borchetta immediately recognized something different about Taylor. She wasn't waiting for someone else to shape her identity. She already knew who she was. She wrote her own songs. She understood her audience. She had opinions about her music. And perhaps most importantly, she was authentic. Authenticity is difficult to manufacture. Audiences can usually tell the difference between someone performing a role and someone simply being themselves. Borchetta believed Taylor could become the face of his new label. Taylor saw something equally valuable. Instead of becoming one artist among hundreds, she could become one of the foundation stones of an entirely new company. It was a gamble for both of them. Big Machine had no long history, no massive catalog, no guarantee of success. Joining an established label might have appeared safer. Instead, Taylor chose growth over comfort. That decision reflected a pattern that would appear throughout her career. She repeatedly chose environments where she could have influence, rather than simply acceptance. Soon, Taylor Swift became the very first artist signed to Big Machine Records. The partnership wasn't built solely on contracts, it was built on shared belief. Both sides needed each other. Taylor needed a label willing to invest in a teenage songwriter. Big Machine needed an artist capable of proving the label belonged alongside Nashville's biggest names. Together, they were building something neither could build alone. Recording sessions soon followed. Unlike many young artists entering the music business, Taylor wasn't simply handed songs chosen by executives. She arrived carrying years of notebooks, ideas, stories, lyrics, and experiences. Many of the songs came directly from her own life. High school friendships, first crushes, embarrassing moments, family or dreams, disappointment. They felt real because they were. That honesty became her brand long before anyone called it branding. Consumers are surrounded by polished marketing every day. Authenticity cuts through the noise. Listeners didn't just hear Taylor's music. They recognized pieces of themselves inside it. The strategy wasn't complicated. It was personal, and personal scales remarkably well. In October 2006, Big Machine released Taylor Swift's debut single, Tim McGraw. It wasn't a massive overnight sensation. There were no instant stadium tours, no billion-dollar headlines, no cultural phenomenon. Instead, something much more important happened. The audience started growing. One listener became 10, 10 became hundreds, hundreds became thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Success was compounding. Taylor promoted relentlessly. She visited country radio stations, performed anywhere people would listen, county fairs, festivals, television appearances, meet and greets, small venues, large venues. If someone wanted Taylor Swift to perform, she showed up. There is a dangerous myth surrounding overnight success. Most overnight successes spend years becoming visible. Taylor's career looked explosive from the outside. Inside, it was built one fan at a time, one performance at a time, one relationship at a time. She signed autographs until her hand hurt, stayed after shows, remembered names, read fan messages online, long before social media became the primary language of entertainment. Taylor understood something most companies still struggle to grasp today. People don't become loyal because you have the best product. They become loyal because you make them feel seen. She wasn't building an audience. She was building a community. That distinction would eventually become worth billions. Then came her debut album. Released in late 2006, Taylor Swift steadily climbed the charts over the following months, driven by singles including Teardrops on My Guitar, Our Song, and Picture to Burn. Rather than peaking quickly and fading away, the album demonstrated remarkable longevity. It remained on the Billboard 200 for years. Country audiences embraced her. Teenagers found someone who sounded like them. Parents appreciated her songwriting. The industry realized something unusual was happening. Taylor Swift wasn't becoming another country singer. She was becoming a brand. And brands can outgrow the industries that create them. What no one fully realized yet was that the biggest transformation of her career was still years away. This chapter demonstrates one of the most important principles in entrepreneurship. The right partnership can multiply potential. Taylor Swift and Scott Borchetta each possessed something the other lacked. Taylor had exceptional creative talent, authenticity, and a growing catalog of original songs. Borchetta had industry experience, relationships, and the willingness to build a new label around an emerging artist. Neither side guaranteed success, but together they dramatically increased each other's odds. This is a lesson found throughout business history. Apple had Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Microsoft had Bill Gates and Paul Allen. Google had Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Great partnerships don't eliminate risk. They make extraordinary outcomes possible. Taylor also demonstrated another principle that would define her career. She never viewed fans as transactions. She viewed them as relationships. Relationships compound, just like investments. Taylor Swift had proven she could succeed in country music. For many artists, that would have been enough. But the most successful builders rarely ask how to protect what they've already created. They ask a far more dangerous question. What if this is only the beginning? The answer would transform Taylor Swift from a country music star into one of the biggest entertainment brands on earth. Success changes people, but even more importantly, success changes expectations. When Taylor Swift released her self-titled debut album, she had accomplished something most young artists only dream about. She had broken through. She had loyal fans, hit songs, industry recognition, a growing national profile. But inside every successful business lies a dangerous question. Can you do it again? History is filled with entrepreneurs who built one successful product, one successful company, one successful moment, only to discover they couldn't repeat it. The second act is often harder than the first, because now the world is watching. For Taylor Swift, that second act became Fearless. Released in November 2008, the album wasn't simply another collection of songs, it was a declaration. Taylor wasn't trying to preserve her early success. She was trying to expand it. She continued writing songs drawn from her own experiences. High school, relationships, dreams, uncertainty, hope. The subjects weren't revolutionary. The honesty was. Millions of young listeners didn't hear polished celebrities. They heard themselves. That emotional connection became one of Taylor's greatest competitive advantages. She wasn't creating music for everyone. She was creating music for someone specific. Ironically, that specificity made her universal, because while every person's story is different, the emotions behind those stories often aren't. Love, fear, embarrassment, excitement, heartbreak, hope. Taylor packaged universal emotions inside deeply personal stories. That combination proved incredibly powerful. Then something remarkable happened. Fearless debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. Week after week, month after month, It remained one of the best-selling albums in America. Hit after hit followed. Love Story, You Belong With Me, White Horse, 15. Each expanded her audience. Country listeners stayed. Pop audiences arrived. Teenagers became lifelong fans. Parents listened alongside their children. Taylor Swift wasn't crossing genres. She was building bridges between them. Businesses often talk about expanding markets. Taylor was living it. She wasn't abandoning country music. She was making country storytelling accessible to audiences who had never considered themselves country fans. That subtle distinction mattered. Expansion is easier when existing customers don't feel abandoned. Taylor wasn't replacing her audience. She was inviting new people to join it. Awards soon followed. The Country Music Association recognized her. The Academy of Country Music honored her. Then came one of the industry's highest achievements. At just 20 years old, Taylor Swift became the youngest artist at the time to win the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. The recognition confirmed what fans already believed. Taylor wasn't a passing trend. She had become one of music's defining voices. Yet behind the trophies, another business lesson was quietly unfolding. Every successful album increased something more valuable than revenue: brand trust. Consumers don't buy from brands they recognize. They buy from brands they trust. Every time Taylor released music that met or exceeded expectations, that trust grew stronger. Trust is difficult to measure, but it compounds like interest. And eventually, it becomes one of the most valuable assets a company owns. Then came a night that changed everything. The 2009 MTV Video Music Awards. Taylor had just won Best Female Video. She stepped onto the stage to accept the award, smiling, grateful, 19 years old. Suddenly, the moment was interrupted. Kanye West walked onto the stage, took the microphone, and declared that another artist deserved the award instead. Within seconds, the interruption became international news. Millions watched the clip. Millions more debated it. For Taylor, it could have become the defining moment of her young career. Public embarrassment has ended promising careers before. The internet can be unforgiving. Media narratives can be impossible to control. Taylor chose a different response. She didn't escalate the confrontation. She didn't launch a public campaign. She returned to what had brought her success in the first place: the work. There is a lesson here that extends far beyond entertainment. You cannot always control public opinion. You can control your consistency. Every entrepreneur eventually encounters criticism. Every leader experiences unfair moments. Every company faces public challenges. The strongest brands survive because they continue delivering value after the headlines disappear. Taylor understood something many businesses never learn. Reputation isn't built during easy moments. It's built by how you respond to difficult ones. As Fearless continued dominating charts around the world, Taylor Swift was no longer simply a successful country singer. She had become something much larger: a household name, an international brand. And with every new fan, the foundation beneath her business grew stronger. Still, the biggest transformation of her career had yet to begin, because success creates confidence. Confidence creates courage, and courage often leads to reinvention. Fearless demonstrated a principle found in nearly every enduring company. Your second success establishes credibility. The first breakthrough earns attention. The second proves the system works. Amazon wasn't built on one good quarter. Apple wasn't built on one successful product. Nike wasn't built on one popular shoe. Likewise, Taylor Swift's debut album introduced her to the world. Fearless convinced the world she was here to stay. Equally important was her approach to audience growth. Rather than abandoning her original fans to chase a larger market, she expanded her audience while preserving the authenticity that attracted people in the first place. Many brands lose themselves while trying to grow. Taylor demonstrated that sustainable growth comes from adding new customers without betraying existing ones. That balance would become one of the defining strengths of her career. By 20 years old, Taylor Swift had achieved what many artists spend an entire lifetime pursuing. She had hit records, industry awards, a devoted global fan base. She could have spent the next decade repeating the same formula. Many successful artists do, but extraordinary builders are rarely satisfied protecting yesterday's success. They look toward tomorrow's opportunity, and Taylor was about to make a decision that many believed would destroy her career, leaving behind the genre that made her famous. Success can become a prison. It sounds impossible. After all, isn't success the goal? But history tells a different story. Many companies fail not because they were unsuccessful, but because they became too successful doing one thing. They stop innovating. They protect yesterday. They become afraid of tomorrow. The same danger exists in entertainment. An artist finds a winning formula. The audience loves it. The record label loves it. The industry rewards it, so they repeat it. Again and again until the audience moves on. Taylor Swift understood something that few artists fully appreciate. The goal wasn't to remain the biggest country artist. The goal was to remain relevant. Those are two very different ambitions. By the early 2010s, Taylor Swift had become one of the biggest names in country music. She had won countless awards, broken sales records, sold millions of albums, filled arenas across North America. She could have comfortably remained exactly where she was. Financially, it made sense. Professionally, it looked safe. But innovation rarely feels safe. After releasing Speak Now in 2010, an album she wrote entirely by herself, Taylor demonstrated something critics had questioned for years. She wasn't simply a performer surrounded by talented writers. She was one of the most accomplished songwriters of her generation. Every lyric, every melody, every story, written by one person, that achievement mattered. Not because it impressed critics, because it strengthened her brand. Authenticity had become her competitive advantage. Then came Red in 2012. At first glance, it looked like another successful Taylor Swift album. But beneath the surface, something very different was happening. The music had begun to change. Country influences remained, but pop production was becoming impossible to ignore. Electronic sounds, larger choruses, more expansive arrangements. Taylor wasn't abandoning country music overnight. She was preparing her audience for evolution. The transition was gradual, intentional, strategic. The best brand transformations rarely happen all at once. They happen one trusted step at a time. Then came the decision, one that shocked Nashville, one that divided fans, one that terrified industry executives. Taylor announced that her next album would be pure pop. No compromises, no country radio strategy, no gradual blending, a complete reinvention. That album would be called 1989. It was named after the year she was born, a symbolic choice, almost as if she were introducing herself to the world all over again. For many observers, the move looked reckless. Why abandon the audience that made you famous? Why leave behind the genre where you dominate? Why risk everything? Because Taylor wasn't asking, how do I protect my success? She was asking, where is the future? That question changed everything. Released in October 2014, 1989 became an instant phenomenon. Shake It Off, Blank Space, Style, Bad Blood, Wildest Dreams. Hit after hit dominated global charts. The album debuted at #1. It became one of the best-selling albums of the decade. Taylor Swift was no longer one of country music's biggest stars. She had become one of the biggest entertainers on earth. The reinvention worked, but not because she abandoned her identity, because she preserved its core. The production changed, the audience expanded, the genre evolved, but the storytelling remained. That was the brand. Consumers often mistake products for brands. Products change, brands represent promises. Apple has built desktops, music players, phones, tablets, watches, and now mixed reality devices. The products evolved, the promise did not. Taylor's promise had always been the same. I'll tell honest stories about human emotions. Whether accompanied by a banjo or a synthesizer, that promise never changed. Then another transformation occurred. Taylor Swift stopped being viewed solely as a musician. She became a cultural force. Fashion, social media, award shows and television, streaming, global tours, magazine covers, brand partnerships. Everywhere people looked, Taylor Swift seemed to be there. But perhaps the most remarkable part wasn't visibility. It was intentionality. Unlike many celebrities, Taylor rarely overexposed herself without purpose. Appearances supported projects. Projects strengthened the brand. The brand increased demand. Demand increased leverage. Leverage created freedom. Freedom created ownership. Everything connected. Nothing appeared accidental. As her influence continued growing, Taylor also began challenging industry norms. She publicly questioned how streaming platforms compensated artists. In 2014, she removed her music from Spotify, arguing that creative work should be properly valued rather than given away under business models she believed undervalued artists. Whether people agreed with her or not, she had shifted the conversation. This wasn't merely a superstar protecting income. It was a creator advocating for the perceived value of intellectual property. Once again, ownership was becoming the central theme of her story. The world just didn't realize it yet. By the end of the 1989 era, Taylor Swift had accomplished something almost unheard of. She had successfully reinvented one of the biggest brands in entertainment, without losing the trust of the audience that built it. That may have been her greatest achievement up to that point. But life has a way of testing success. And soon, Taylor would face challenges that no amount of talent could solve. Public criticism, media backlash, industry conflict, and eventually, a battle over ownership that would redefine her legacy forever. This chapter illustrates one of the most valuable lessons in business strategy. Great brands evolve without abandoning their identity. Too many companies confuse their product with their purpose. Products change. Technology changes. Markets change. Customer expectations change. Purpose should remain remarkably consistent. Taylor's genre evolved. Her storytelling never did. That consistency allowed existing fans to grow with her while attracting millions of new listeners around the world. This is precisely how enduring companies expand. They innovate around the edges while protecting the promise at the center. Taylor also demonstrated another crucial leadership principle. She was willing to cannibalize her own success before someone else did. History rewards organizations that disrupt themselves before competitors have the chance. Taylor Swift had conquered country music. She had conquered pop music. She had built one of the strongest brands in entertainment. From the outside, it looked like she owned everything she had created. But behind the scenes, a question was quietly waiting. A question every entrepreneur, inventor, filmmaker, author, and business owner eventually faces. Who actually owns the work? For Taylor Swift, the answer would become the most painful lesson of her career and the most important business decision of her life. Every entrepreneur eventually learns the same painful lesson. Creating something and owning something are not always the same. It sounds impossible. How can someone create a business, write a book, invent a product, or record an album without owning it? Because ownership is determined by contracts, not effort, not passion, not even talent. For decades, this had been one of the music industry's best-kept secrets. Record labels typically finance recordings. In exchange, they owned the master recordings. Artists owned the songs they wrote, but the recordings themselves often belonged to someone else for generations. This was simply considered the cost of getting discovered. Young artists accepted the trade. Opportunity today, ownership tomorrow. Sometimes, tomorrow never came. Taylor Swift understood these agreements. She wasn't naive. She knew that when she signed with Big Machine Records as a teenager, the label would own the masters to the albums she recorded there. At the time, it was the price of entry. Without Big Machine, there might never have been a Taylor Swift phenomenon. Scott Borchetta had taken an enormous risk by signing an unknown 16-year-old. Taylor had taken an equally enormous risk by betting on a brand new record label. Together, they built something extraordinary. Over the next 13 years, that partnership produced one of the most successful catalogs in music history. Taylor Swift, Fearless, Speak Now, Red, 1989, Reputation. Each album increased the value of Big Machine Records. Each album strengthened Taylor's global brand. Each album became another piece of entertainment history. But behind every platinum record, one fact remained unchanged. Taylor did not own the master recordings. By 2018, Taylor's contract with Big Machine was ending. For the first time in her professional career, she had leverage. She had options. She had become one of the most valuable artists in the world. Negotiations began. Taylor hoped to acquire ownership of her masters. According to her public statements, the proposal she received required earning back the rights one album at a time by committing to record additional albums for Big Machine. From her perspective, that wasn't ownership. It was another exchange, another cycle, another contract. She chose a different path. Taylor signed a new recording agreement with Universal Music Group and Republic Records. This time, she negotiated from a position of strength. One of the most significant provisions ensured that ownership of her future master recordings would belong to her. For the first time, Taylor Swift would truly own the music she created going forward. It was a milestone, but it didn't solve the problem. The recordings that had built her career still belonged to someone else. Then, everything changed. In June 2019, music executive Scooter Braun, through his company, acquired Big Machine Label Group. The acquisition included the master recordings of Taylor Swift's first 6 studio albums. The news spread around the world within hours. Taylor publicly stated that she had learned of the sale when it was announced publicly and expressed deep disappointment that her life's work had changed hands without her being able to purchase the catalog herself. Scott Borchetta disputed aspects of Taylor's account, saying she had opportunities to negotiate. The public conversation quickly became one of the most closely watched disputes in modern entertainment. Fans took sides. Industry executives debated the issue. Lawyers analyzed contracts. Musicians began asking questions many had never considered before. Who owns the music? Who controls creative work? Who benefits from decades of artistic labor? The debate extended far beyond Taylor Swift. It became a conversation about creators everywhere. For many people, this looked like the end of the story. Taylor had lost. The recordings were gone. The catalog belonged to someone else. Business history is filled with moments like this. A company loses a patent, an entrepreneur loses control of a business, an inventor watches someone else profit from an idea. Most people spend years fighting what they lost. Taylor asked a different question. What if I simply build it again? That question changed everything. Under U.S. copyright law and the terms of her agreements, Taylor retained the rights to the underlying songs she had written or co-written, even though she did not own the original master recordings. That distinction became the opening. She couldn't reclaim the existing masters, but she could create new ones. The idea sounded almost unbelievable. Re-record every album, every song, every vocal, every arrangement, rebuild years of work from the ground up. Many believed fans would continue listening to the originals. Many believed the effort wouldn't be worth it. They underestimated something Taylor had spent nearly 2 decades building: trust. When she explained why ownership mattered, her audience listened. When she asked them to support new recordings, millions did. The strategy wasn't powered by legal arguments, it was powered by relationships. The same community she had nurtured since county fairs and autograph lines was now helping rewrite music business history. This is the moment where Taylor Swift's story stops being just an entertainment story. It becomes a masterclass in business strategy. She couldn't control the past. She controlled the future. Many entrepreneurs waste years trying to recover what they've lost. The best entrepreneurs create something more valuable instead. Taylor realized that the true asset wasn't the old recording. It was her ability to create demand. Demand is more valuable than inventory because if people choose your new product over the old one, the market follows the customer, not the contract. This is one of the clearest examples of strategic leverage in modern business. Most people saw a catalog that had been sold. Taylor Swift saw an opportunity no one else had imagined. She wasn't going to spend years fighting over the past. She was going to make the past obsolete. With one decision, she transformed a legal dispute into one of the most brilliant business strategies the entertainment industry had ever witnessed. The next chapter wouldn't just reclaim her music. It would redefine the value of ownership for an entire generation of creators. There are moments in business history that permanently change the rules. Apple didn't invent the smartphone. It reinvented it. Netflix didn't invent home entertainment. It reinvented distribution. Amazon didn't invent retail. It reinvented convenience. Taylor Swift didn't reinvent music. She reinvented ownership. When Taylor Swift announced she would re-record her first 6 albums, the music industry reacted with skepticism. Some believed it was symbolic. Others believed it was emotional. Many doubted it would make a meaningful financial difference. After all, why would millions of people choose to listen to songs they already owned? The originals were everywhere: streaming services, radio stations, personal playlists, physical CDs. For decades, re-recording old albums had rarely altered the marketplace in any significant way. History suggested the original recordings would always dominate. History was about to meet a fan base unlike any other. Taylor didn't simply announce re-recordings. She introduced a new identity. Every album would carry 2 words that soon became recognized around the world. Taylor's version. Those 2 words accomplished something remarkable. They transformed a legal distinction into a branding movement. Consumers weren't simply choosing between 2 recordings. They were choosing between 2 stories. One represented the past. The other represented ownership. One represented a business transaction. The other represented an artist reclaiming creative control. For millions of fans, the decision became easy. Perhaps the most fascinating part wasn't the music. It was the psychology. Taylor understood that human beings don't simply purchase products, they participate in stories. Her audience didn't feel like consumers, they felt like partners. Supporting Taylor's version became participation in a movement. Millions intentionally streamed the new recordings, requested them on radio stations, added them to playlists, shared them online, recommended them to friends. The fans became marketers, voluntarily. No advertising campaign can compete with genuine belief. When customers become advocates, growth accelerates exponentially. The financial implications were enormous. Every stream redirected attention. Every purchase increased the value of assets Taylor controlled. Every licensing opportunity shifted toward recordings she owned. Film studios, television producers, advertisers, sports leagues, commercial brands. Many increasingly licensed Taylor's version recordings rather than the originals. Control of future commercial opportunities gradually moved in Taylor's favor. She hadn't recovered the old catalog. She had built a stronger one. Then something extraordinary happened. The business world began paying attention. Law schools discussed the strategy. Business schools analyzed the execution. Entrepreneurs referenced Taylor Swift in conversations about intellectual property. Artists across the industry reconsidered their own contracts. Ownership had become dinner table conversation, not because of legislation, not because of lawsuits, because one artist had demonstrated that creators possessed more leverage than many believed. Taylor's version wasn't simply an album series. It became one of the most influential branding campaigns of the 21st century. This chapter demonstrates one of the most powerful strategic principles in business. Never compete on identical terms if you can redefine the competition. Taylor did not ask consumers to compare 2 identical products. She gave the new product a new meaning. That meaning became a competitive advantage. She also understood the difference between a transaction and a movement. Transactions end after the purchase. Movements grow stronger with every participant. By aligning ownership with her audience's values, Taylor transformed millions of listeners into passionate advocates. This is the same principle behind many of history's strongest brands. People don't just buy Nike shoes. They buy achievement. People don't just buy Apple products. They buy innovation. People didn't just stream Taylor's version. They supported ownership. That emotional layer dramatically increased the value of the product. By rewriting her past, Taylor Swift had transformed her future. The re-recording strengthened her ownership, her influence, her negotiating power. But another chapter was already unfolding, one that would eclipse every record she had ever broken. Not inside a recording studio, but inside stadiums across the world. The next act wouldn't just become the biggest tour of her career, it would become the highest grossing concert tour in history and complete her transformation from global superstar to billion-dollar business empire. There are successful tours, there are record-breaking tours, and then there is the Eras Tour. When Taylor Swift announced the tour in November 2022, demand exploded almost instantly. Millions of fans rushed online to buy tickets. The demand was unlike anything the live entertainment industry had ever experienced. Ticketing systems struggled under the volume. Long virtual queues stretched into the millions. For many fans, simply getting the chance to buy a ticket felt like winning the lottery. It wasn't just a concert announcement. It had become a global event. Why? Because Taylor wasn't selling 3 hours of music. She was selling the story of an entire career. The concept itself was brilliant. Instead of promoting only her newest album, Taylor invited audiences to experience every chapter of her artistic journey. Each era represented more than an album. It represented a period in her fans' lives. For one person, Fearless was high school. For another, 1989 meant college. For someone else, Folklore became the soundtrack to isolation during the pandemic. Taylor understood something every great brand eventually learns. People don't remember products. They remember how those products made them feel. The Eras Tour wasn't built around songs. It was built around memories. Then came opening night. More than 40 songs, nearly 3.5 hours, multiple costume changes, massive stage productions, sophisticated lighting systems, moving platforms, pyrotechnics, choreography, video walls, live musicians, dancers, precision timing measured down to the second. Every transition had been rehearsed relentlessly. Every visual cue planned months in advance. This wasn't simply entertainment, it was operations management at an extraordinary scale. Each show resembled the execution of a Fortune 500 product launch. Thousands of workers coordinated logistics. Hundreds of trucks transported equipment. Dozens of countries required complex customs planning. Engineers, designers, security professionals, medical teams, transportation specialists, hospitality staff. The Eras Tour wasn't powered by one performer. It was powered by an ecosystem. Behind every successful business, there is usually an invisible operating system. Customers rarely notice it. They see the final experience. They don't see the planning. Taylor's audience saw magic. Her team managed logistics that rivaled major international sporting events. That distinction matters. Vision creates opportunity. Execution creates results. Then something happened that surprised even economists. Cities began measuring the Taylor Swift effect. Hotels reached full capacity. Restaurants experienced record business. Retail stores reported increased sales. Rideshare demand surged. Public transportation systems expanded service. Local tourism boards estimated hundreds of millions of dollars in economic activity surrounding individual tour stops. In some cities, temporary economic boosts became so noticeable that analysts informally referred to them as Swiftonomics. One artist, one weekend, hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through local economies. This had moved beyond entertainment. Taylor Swift had become an economic engine. By December 2023, the Eras Tour became the first concert tour confirmed to surpass $1 billion in ticket sales. As additional international dates concluded in 2024, total ticket revenue exceeded $2 billion, making it the highest grossing concert tour in history. The numbers were staggering. But revenue alone doesn't explain the achievement, because ticket sales represented only one part of the ecosystem. Merchandise, streaming, album sales, local licensing, brand partnerships, media attention, theatrical distribution. Every concert created momentum across multiple businesses simultaneously. This is known as a flywheel. One successful activity strengthens another, which strengthens another, which strengthens another. Taylor wasn't operating a concert. She was operating an ecosystem. Then came another unexpected decision. Instead of waiting years for a traditional concert film release, Taylor partnered directly to bring Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour, to theaters. The film became one of the highest-grossing concert films ever released. Again, she demonstrated something business leaders repeatedly emphasize. Don't create value once, extend it. A single concert performance became a stadium event, a movie, a streaming release, merchandise, social media content, press coverage, future demand. Every asset worked harder. Perhaps the most remarkable part of the Eras Tour wasn't its scale, it was its trust. Millions of people willingly planned vacations around concerts, saved money for months, traveled across countries, exchanged friendship bracelets with complete strangers. The audience wasn't attending because Taylor was famous. She was famous because the audience trusted her. Trust remains the rarest currency in business, and Taylor Swift had spent nearly 2 decades earning it. By now, the business world had begun viewing Taylor differently. She wasn't simply a recording artist. She wasn't simply a songwriter. She wasn't simply an entertainer. She had become the CEO of one of the world's most valuable personal brands, one built on ownership, innovation, execution, community, and relentless consistency. The Eras Tour demonstrates one of the most powerful principles in modern business. Brands become ecosystems when every product strengthens every other product. Taylor wasn't monetizing concerts. She was creating a flywheel. Concerts increased streaming. Streaming increased album sales. Albums increased merchandise demand. Merchandise strengthened community identity. Community increased future ticket demand. Future demand strengthened negotiating leverage. Every part of the business reinforced every other part. Amazon built a flywheel. Apple built a flywheel. Disney built a flywheel. Taylor Swift built one too. But perhaps the greatest lesson wasn't operational. It was emotional. The strongest brands don't simply create customers. They create belonging. Taylor's fans don't describe themselves merely as listeners. They describe themselves as Swifties. That single word represents one of the strongest brand communities ever built by an individual creator. By the end of the Eras Tour, Taylor Swift had accomplished something few people in history ever have. She had become larger than her industry. The concerts were sold out. The records were broken. The business was thriving. But perhaps her greatest achievement couldn't be measured in ticket sales, or awards, or even billions of dollars. It was the blueprint she left behind. A blueprint showing creators everywhere that talent may open the first door, but ownership, strategy, and trust are what build an empire. A little girl in Pennsylvania sat alone with a notebook. She had no stadiums, no awards, no billion-dollar tours, only stories she believed were worth writing. Those stories became songs. Those songs became a career. That career became a brand. That brand became a business, and that business became an empire. Taylor Swift's journey reminds us that extraordinary success is rarely built overnight. It's built through thousands of small decisions. To keep learning, to keep creating, to keep adapting, to keep showing up, and perhaps most importantly, to own what you build. Because in the end, talent may open the first door, hard work may keep you in the room, but ownership is what builds generational wealth. This episode has been presented by the Wealth and Business Network, and this has been The Art of Success, Legendary Stories from Around the World. Every empire has an origin. Every achievement has a journey. Every success leaves clues. This series reveals the blueprint. See you next time.